From the heart of Maine, this is the DuView Podcast.
All right, and welcome to this week's episode of the DuView Podcast. I am your host, Du, a.k.a. Ryan Dumont, and this week I am joined by college and longtime friend, Miss Hannah Robillard. Hannah?
How you doing, bud?
Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Happy to be here. Very happy to be here and seeing you today.
Yeah, right
It's been a long time.
It really has. It really has. And, pleasure to have you up here. And so I guess to kind of give some background for Hannah and I, Hannah truly is a Mainer by proxy in a lot of ways. Born and raised in New Hampshire, but now resides here in the great state of Maine. And so I guess just to kick things off, Hannah, what do you like about living in the state of Maine? How are you enjoying it?
Oh, man. I came up here and started a travel nursing gig at Maine Medical Center, fell in love with the hospital, and then very quickly fell in love with the city of Portland. There's so much to do, so much good food, so many good drinks. I'm a big skier snowboarder, so this has been a really great season for me. I've been at Sugarloaf or at Loon or, Sunday River, anything like that. So tons of outdoor activities to be had here as well.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, Maine is very well known for its lush outdoor life and everything like that. I mean, and I've talked about it a lot on the podcast. I know you're a big skier, and so I know that's a huge part of probably what drew you up this way, too, on top
100%.
of, the natural beauty and everything. So I would say of which Maine mountains have you skied, and which have you preferred the most?
Sugarloaf's my top, very easily. I have the Icon Pass this year, which was wonderful. So I had full access to Sugarloaf, which was amazing. I feel like it's the closest you get to out west skiing. You really get that lodge, base life kind of vibe down there.
Yeah.
They've got the fire pit, and they call it the beach area where everyone goes and hangs out. They have Reggae Fest there.
Yep.
It's a great place to have a great time. We did a little trip up there ourselves. A couple years ago.
We did do that. That was fun. We went up during Martin Luther King weekend, and we ended up getting caught in a snowstorm. So
we did.
It did affect the ski conditions a little bit, and I've since learned, that when I come back as I'm coming back to skiing, I need to get some new equipment and everything like that.
Yeah.
Get some stuff that actually fits, and
it makes a big difference. It does.
It really does. And I don't know, it was funny, not funny, but when I, took a little bit of a tumble there at the top, getting off the lift with you, and the ski patrol guy was literally right there looking at me like, "You good?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we're fine." And then it's like, just had knee surgery last year. And there's the look on his face. He had a balaclava on, but you could tell he was like, "Really, dude?
Are you sure you're good? You sure about that?
Are you sure? Are you sure about that?" Yeah. Seriously, it was good though, and that's then one of the best parts about our friendship. In part is we've gone on these little mini adventures, this that, whether it be when we were in school or when we got out of school, and
we had a blast.
Yeah.
We always did, and I've always appreciated our friendship because we've been able to, even with distance and with all the traveling and everything, and COVID, but we've always made it. We've made it work.
Yeah.
A little bit of distance hasn't changed.
No, not really. And I mean, this is probably I'll be honest with you, the longest we've gone without hanging out or seeing each other. It's just
been a hot minute.
It's been busy, and like we were talking about, before we decided to start recording, it was just there's been so much in flux over the last year, and I mean that's nothing new once you are onto that new adulthood part of your life. Once that safety net, I mean I guess not for everybody, there wasn't always a huge safety net, but when that safety net of whether it be St. Anselm College or just college in general goes away, it changes things, and availabilities, and like you've always said, the best thing was when we lived 2 minutes away from each other.
I was just telling someone a story the other day. I was like, and I was telling them I was coming up to do the podcast.
Yeah.
And I mentioned, I was like, oh yeah, this is my friend Duma. When we lived when our dorms were right next to each other, you guys would go up to C Shop to grab something to eat. And I'd be like, hey, I don't feel like going, but would you mind dropping it off at my window?
And we would. We would too. That was the great part about that.
It was so great. It was like if I needed anything, my window was right there. You could just
I know.
And I think we were right next to each other too.
Yeah, we were in adjacent buildings. We were in Brady and you were in
Bertrand?
Something like that. Yeah, something like that.
I don't remember.
But the fact of the matter being is that, like, that's the unique thing. And, like, I've talked about this actually quite a bit because, like, everybody who I've had on as a guest, kind of been a theme, if you couldn't tell. Everybody that I've kind of had on this year has had some connection to St. Anselm College.
In some way or another.
In some way or another. You know, I've had, you know, Jake and Pony and those guys on earlier on, and yourself, obviously.
Yeah.
And so, you know, just trying to highlight some of these, you know, because, like, for example, Jake did live in Maine for a little bit, and, you know, trying to find that good line between, you know, being a very Maine-centric, which I am, you know, like, to the point, you know, have you ever rode a moose to school? You know, that classic. Oh, gosh. But,
I have seen moose since I've been here. I had not, the whole time I lived in New Hampshire, even when I was like, you know, my grandparents had a house on Winnipesaukee. I never saw one. Being in Maine for a year, I was like, oh, I've seen a moose. Cool.
I'm checked out. Yeah, right.
Check it off the box.
Check it off the list, right? I mean, that's like actually a requirement, you know, to live here is you have to have seen a moose,
you know? So I can say I've lived here now.
Yeah, no, exactly.
I'm part of the Maine cult.
Yeah, I mean, hey, welcome. You know, it's a part of the ship, part of the crew. Oh, shoot. So I guess, you know, talking about, you know, college, and we all had, you know, that's what I like asking everybody that's come on, you know, like, so I guess, you know, for me, I mean, political science, Institute of Politics, small campus, all that stuff, which I've talked about before, and everybody has their own reasons. So what was your reason for, I guess, choosing St. Anselm College or the St. Anselm experience in general? Because I know that we all, again, you being a nursing major, it's a very different experience for really any other program at that school, to be completely honest.
It was, and that was a big draw for me. So my little 18-year-old self, I really thought I wanted to go and be a doctor, and I wanted to stay in New Hampshire. I wasn't sure what I wanted yet. I wasn't nearly as... I didn't have as big of a worldview then as I do now, and as I did when I grew throughout school. So I wanted a small campus, coming from a huge high school. I mean, I graduated with... My graduating class was 409. I think our graduating class in St. A's was like 500 around there.
Yeah,
it wasn't much. It wasn't much bigger.
Pretty comparable to your high school. For me, 175 graduating class. So everything was going to be bigger.
Yeah. So for me, it felt, you know, it didn't feel as intimidating. And I knew it had, and at the time, like I said, I was trying to get into a doctorate program, and then quickly decided that, you know what, I don't think that's actually for me. I think I want to go the nursing route. And St. A's just happened to be one of the best nursing schools in the Northeast. I mean,
and that's something, I'll be completely honest with you, a quick sidebar on that. I didn't even realize, like, how intense and, like, legendary, I guess, in a way, or infamous, depending on how you want to look at it. Like, the nursing program at St. A's is or was and continues to be, like, and I was honestly thinking about this. I was like, you know, the majority of, like, like your nurses in New England come from, like, St. Anselm College. Or like the good ones anyway, like seriously. Like,
St. A's, UNH, UNE, a lot of those.
Yeah.
But St. A's really, I thought it was cute. I thought it was a beautiful campus, and it felt comfortable enough, and it was close to home for me. So it just kind of ticked all those boxes, and it worked in my favor. And then, you know, once I was in the nursing program, I realized I was going to get my ass handed to me, absolutely. But it paid off. It paid off very much so. So,
well, I remember you guys... You know, well, you and my other friends who were nursing majors up till Lord knows what hours of the night, studying, homework, clinical, etc., so forth.
Oh yeah, it was a full-time job on itself. It really was. And I mean, it felt... They warned us when we came into nursing school. They're like, you're not going to get to go to the good parties. And all of us were like, yeah, sure, whatever. We're going to make it happen. Oh, yeah. You know, when they schedule 3 exams and an essay due on Halloween, they mean it. You're not going to get to go to the good parties.
True. That's true, too.
So it was, but it was hard. It was... I mean, quite frankly, I'm not going to lie to you. It was pretty miserable when you're in it, you know.
Yeah.
And there's
I get
nothing
you
else
there.
is really... It's hard to look past and look beyond your own bullshit, and
it is.
It's really hard. So in the moment when you're stuck there and that's all you can do, and you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel yet, it was rough. But I will say, the St. Anselm College nursing program left me feeling wildly prepared when I got into the field of nursing.
That's nice, because as I've critiqued my own political science program, like I said, they prepared me with the knowledge, but I don't think they prepared me with the practical application. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that you can say, and again, you're a little bit more hands-on of a field, so I'm glad that you can say that but that's like the whole fucking point, you know, not to get serious for a minute, but that's like the whole fucking point, is to prepare you for what's next. And I guess that's just like kind of a letdown, whether it be in just education in general, or whether, you know what I'm saying?
Practical application is
exactly.
wildly
it's like,
important.
Exactly. And like, I don't know, it's like, to a point, like, even when I was in education for my short stint, like, I would look at me like, all right, if we're going to write this paper, there's got to be a reason to writing this paper.
Right.
Like, I'd say to my kids, hey, practical application of this, you're convincing somebody, like, it's a persuasive essay. You're trying to get your way. And that is, like, that's life.
Right. It's how to get your way.
How to get your way.
How to
get
it
what
out.
you want.
Yes.
And I mean, and that's what I was trying to tell the guys. I said, you can catch a lot more, flies with honey than with vinegar.
Mm-hmm.
I said, how you approach people, how your body language, everything you do, whether it's writing or in-person interaction is huge. It's just like, if you come off like, and again, like, I think we see this nowadays, like, we were kind of talking about this, a little bit before. It's just, just the general, like, being kind, but to a point where it's not like getting walked over. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, again, practical application of things. It's like, how do we balance this? And that's what I think that I think that's kind of a unique thing. I guess what I'm trying to get at is that in your nursing program, I feel like you guys had a pretty unique balance of that.
We did. And
again, being a third-party person who didn't take a single nursing class.
And as someone who did go to nursing school, in retrospect, I see it that way too. And also, it was and something that I think is important to think about when you're thinking about just like how nursing school programs are situated, handled, whatever. It was a trade. Initially, nursing school was a trade school.
Yeah,
so
that's fair.
You were learning practical application because that was what the job was it's all practical application. And then, they started wanting to have more of the scientific, like real true background to it and having more of like
the theory
and the
or
practice, whatever. Yeah. So there was a lot that went into it. It's essentially like, what doctors do is they have 8 years of school and they learn all of that, like down to every little nerve, vessel, whatever. They learn all of that.
Yep.
We learn the short answer of it, so we know how to save someone's life when it's necessary. It's
when absolutely necessary.
It's a very condensed and very the curriculum was very hard.
Yep. I'm sure.
It was again, in the long run, it's been worth it. And I will say one thing I really appreciated about St. Anselm's nursing program is the fact that we got like a whole ICU rotation in our clinicals.
Oh, did you?
And a class for ICU. And like in everyone else I have met, and I've worked with travelers from all over the country now.
Right.
So no one else had an ICU rotation. They would do a day shadowing in the ICU. Like they would have an
full week. Yeah.
We had almost a month.
Oh, a month.
It was
Holy shit.
awesome.
Oh,
it was
wow.
awesome. And I knew the first time I did it, I was like, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to do in the field of nursing.
Well, see, that's unique. I don't know how many people can actually like, say that at the time. It's like, man, oh man, like that's to see yourself in that situation and be like, I can see myself doing this, or whatever. That's really cool. And I mean, I think your approach to looking at your, past experience is very, very healthy and appropriate into the sense that you're real about it, but at the same time, it's like, you're not, but you're real about it, but at the same time, it's not like, oh, you're not just like, hitting them with it or just like, like, well, blah, 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 like putting it all back onto the program, It's like, it's a healthy way to look at it.
New grad Hannah wouldn't have felt this way.
No, that's true.
Couple years out of school, I can now look at it with like I said, a better worldview and a better appreciation for it.
And I'm the same way in regards to, my work with the presidential campaign, really kind of came to terms with some of that, because it's like something that, again, you are put into a situation and that you need to, quickly come to terms with, but it's not something you can quickly come to terms with.
No.
Because it's a big part
it's
of your
your
life.
Passion,
Yeah, exactly.
It's your passion. You can't just drop it.
Right, exactly. And you never will. I mean,
No.
like, it's regardless of, if you're nursing or not, you're always going to want to help people in some capacity or do something. Yeah, no, exactly.
I can't help but help, you know?
No, exactly. And I mean, like, that's important to have people like that. And I guess kind of segues nicely into, the next kind of segment of the podcast. As we said, you are a nurse and we did mention COVID, and I guess just kind of, I always wanted to obviously have you on the podcast, Hannah, but I wanted to wait a little bit so I could do a little bit of a retrospective, not putting you up on a pedestal and saying, this is the experience, this is the first person account of everything that happened, but into the sense that, in Maine, in Portland, in, our general community, this is how things went down, and I think that that's pretty fair.
Yeah. And apologies ahead of time if the podcast gets a little bit morbid. I will say,
I know.
over.
I was gonna say, it's medical stuff. It's during again, the last pandemic we've had in 100 years.
Yeah. So it was very traumatizing, and I can't put any light to that situation at all
nor
whatsoever.
should you. But
it was
again,
hard,
I think that it's appropriate that we talk about it now.
100%.
Because you know what? I feel like with a lot of other issues in this country, it would just be glossed over, and we'd be, quote unquote, not forget about it, but forget about it and just move on and whatever. And I don't think that that's always the healthiest way to look at anything either. I want to talk and process it
100%.
into the sense that we can make sure that shit like this doesn't happen again.
Agreed.
Now, are you going to be able to get rid of all diseases and sickness? No, you're not.
Never.
Like again, like bacteria will keep up with us. We know this. But however, could there have been things that could have been done differently in the future? Yes, there could have been.
Of course.
But and we look at that and we try to, see where we're at and go from there, really. And that's just really just trying to reflect back on what happened. And I guess for you, you had very little time in the nursing field, in your new job when you graduated.
Right.
You had very little time before, holy fuck, the country shut down. We're in like scuba gear, like PPE up the yin yang, and so I guess, can you kind of describe like that time period and like just transitioning from like the early times of being a new hire to holy fuck, it's the pandemic?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I mean, I guess just to put a little bit of perspective into it.
Yes,
so
please.
we graduated 2019.
Yes.
COVID-19. So
Yep.
we graduated in May.
Yep.
And then I want to say December 2019 is when we got hit. So
Yeah, it
new
started
grad-
anyway.
it
Even
started.
November. You could
It's
even say even November.
Even November,
was
right?
when things started to leak across. Yep.
The states.
Yep.
Yeah. So new grad nurses, we get
Yep.
about 3 months of orientation, and then that's it. So you think about it. I was only on my own. I started in June, we'll say.
Yeah.
No, not even. I think it was like August. I think it was later than that.
Okay. But,
So it was
but
like
still.
Anyway, it was like August. Just starting on my own, getting my feet, getting my bearings, really
Yeah.
learning how to operate as a nurse. And at this point, I wasn't in the ICU, so it was a very different
Yes.
environment that I was working under. And then I remember we got our first COVID patient, and we brought out these helmets with this like plastic sleeve thing over it and like a battery pack, and I was like, what on earth is happening? We were like double gown, double gloved, had booties on. We
Yep.
didn't know what to
Right.
expect. And then I was pretty fortunate that the floor that I was on, so in the very beginning, they were kind of deeming like clean versus dirty.
Yeah,
So I was
yep.
on the clean floor.
Yep.
But the thing is, I was on a cardiac floor. People will come in with shortness of breath, cough, and
Which
it's
are all symptoms
all
of COVID.
the symptoms
Yeah.
of COVID. But could it be a congestive heart failure exacerbation?
could
It be this? Could it be this?
Of
So,
course it could have been. Right.
but it was also, I think at this point, it was before we even had a test
Yeah,
to really
no.
know.
Yep.
So we didn't really know who was clean versus dirty. We just
Not
knew
really.
who definitely was COVID and who maybe could have, but we didn't know. Especially
Right.
because some people were asymptomatic carriers at this
Yes,
point.
they
That was
were.
still
Yep.
a whole part of it. So I remember, and this is at the point we had the test, my one of my LNAs came up to me and she goes, "Hey, this guy's starting to spike a fever. I have 5 other patients. They're all ringing. They're all asking for shit from me." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll get to him in a minute. I'll bring him some Tylenol." And then like the wheels weren't turning yet. It hadn't clicked yet. And then all of a sudden I go in and he's like, "I'm coughing a lot and I have a fever." And I was like, I'm like, "Have you, do you have any known, contact with somebody who's had COVID?" And he's like, "Maybe." And then we wheeled him over to the dirty side of the dirty side. 'Cause
COVID side.
Rule him out,
Yeah.
wait for his test to come back, whatever. And I was off that night and I came back to work 4 days later. Turns out that patient was still there, COVID positive, and nobody and no one told me. So it was also the time where we were like, we don't know if we've been exposed. I wasn't,
right.
I was wearing a mask, but I was up in his face. He was coughing on me, how do I know if I'm safe to be at work? And then there was my coworkers starting to get sick. They're like, I don't know if I can smell or not. I'm like, oh my
here we
God.
go.
And so it did cascade down and become that.
And
and
I mean, you had a
then-
lot of nurses getting sick and even
Lot of
having
us.
to work while they were sick. And
Yeah.
it's like, I was just sitting there and I'm thinking about all you guys and I'm just like baffled. It's like,
Absolutely. And we
wow.
were too. And we
Yep.
were too. We were like, is this how we're supposed to be treated? That's why you saw
Right.
this mass exodus of nursing during
Yep.
this time. And no
Yep.
one wanted to be a nurse because, well, they're putting us up on the front lines to to get slaughtered, really,
yeah,
without
basically,
anything.
yeah, leading the lambs to slaughter, right?
Exactly. And then shortly after, I was like, you know what? If I'm going to be doing this job, I want to be in the ICU, and I want to feel like I'm actually saving lives doing it. And that was, I went down. My first day in the ICU was when COVID round 2 hit.
Yep.
Hard.
Were you in Portland at this point?
No. I got a year of ICU experience down in Nashville before I came up
that's
here.
right. All right.
Yep.
Just establishing timeline.
Yeah. So it was about like a year into my nursing career when I went into the ICU, did a year in ICU, and then came to Portland.
Gotcha.
So that year, we didn't know what the fuck we were doing. We didn't know what we were up against. We saw these patients that were in what we call ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome. And that's what happens when the oxygen levels in your blood are lower than the amount of oxygen we're trying to give to you. So if you're on like one of these high flow nasal cannula things that are pumping 100% of oxygen into you with like a 40 liter flow, and your blood oxygen level is below 70,
right.
that's not looking good in your favor. That looks like there's going to be a tube in your throat doing the work for you.
Yeah, because you aren't able to literally support your own respiratory system.
Exactly. So I would watch these poor people suffer on the high flow nasal cannula and then a BiPAP mask, which is like positive airway pressure just pushing. And when you're on the mask, we don't want you to vomit, and you need the mask so much to breathe that we can't give you food because we can't risk you vomiting. We can't risk you pushing that air, the food back into your lungs, and then we've set up a pneumonia. It's this whole other problem. So I would just, it was emotional. It was hard. I watched people just tucker out and just get exhausted on the BiPAP machine, and they were trying to prone themselves. So proning is when you're lying on your stomach, pretty much so that you can open up the lungs better in the back for more gas exchange, CO2 to oxygen exchange. So we were trying to do that as much as we could with these patients, but the BiPAP mask falls off in the middle of the night because they move their hand up or something, like, and then all of a sudden we're scrambling in there because their oxygen's dropping into the 70s or the 60s.
Right,
even,
and they're literally like,
and they're gasping.
Their body is shutting down.
They're
like,
guppy breathing, gasping for their breaths, and the fear I would see on people's faces was traumatic. It was traumatizing.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, like, it's like I said, global pandemic that had not been seen in 100 years. Like last time we dealt with anything like this was Spanish flu, and I mean, like, being a student of history as well, you hope and pray that the next time something big and crazy like that happens, is that you hope that like we've learned, and obviously, like, we. You know what I'm trying to say? It's like, obviously we haven't learned our lesson in part. You know what I mean? Like, there's a proper way of kind of handling, events like this. And I think that it really proved that there were a lot of, and still are a lot of, cracks in our healthcare system. Huge cracks. Whether it comes from strictly the political side of things, like coming from Congress giving, information out, or whether it comes from, like the side of the hospital, or the insert, institution here. It's just so, the healthcare companies, insurance companies and everything like that, and how corrupt some of that is. It's too bad.
It is too bad.
On top of everything, I felt like it created this perfect storm.
Yeah, we were worked to the bone. We were overwhelmed, and we were. It got disheartening. It was discouraging every day because you came in and we would just go down the line of that patient died, that patient died, that patient died. Okay, now we're getting 3 more and they might die. We don't know.
Right.
It was so disheartening because, as an ICU nurse, you save lives. That's what we do. We are trained to save lives. and it just felt like all of the efforts of all of the staff was vermouth. Absolutely.
And that's so disheartening. Again, like, your whole point is, like, as you just said, as an ICU nurse specifically, is to help people and to save people. And when, either they're not choosing to do things to make sure they don't end up in your care, or whatever, it's frustrating. And you're like, why the fuck am I even doing this?
Why am I doing this?
And I think, I saw it, again, I was in a different field, but in education. I feel like you saw you had a mass exodus of teachers after that first year of COVID teaching, because and again, same thing with the nurses, they asked too goddamn much of people.
Absolutely,
they asked for the sun, the moon, and the stars when all they could give is some sand.
Absolutely.
And that's how I feel. That's how I genuinely feel about a lot of the stuff that went on during that period. Again, being in the trades now, completely different side of the coin. You know, like we would have kept working regardless if there's.
Of course.
The sky could be raining fire, and we'd still probably be wiring houses.
You can't leave
and stuff
till
like
somebody's
that.
heating hot water.
Yeah, right.
On,
No,
okay?
exactly. You can't.
You
It's not. You're
can't.
not allowed. But you know what I'm saying? Like that didn't stop. You know, it didn't stop the trade work really at all. I mean, but like at the same time, I don't know. It's just so crazy. I mean, I'm sure you guys had like shortages of supplies and this, that, and 100 other things, like masks and everything like that.
Yeah, we were supposed to re-wear our N95s, which, by the way, you're only supposed to have those as a one-time wear. You wear them in a room, you come out, you throw it out. Like, that was what it was supposed to use. We were reusing and re-wearing the same masks for 7+ days, for weeks. It was disgusting. We were supposed to put them in a brown paper bag, and they were like, well, no, we're going to autoclave them and put them in this machine and have a sterilization process. I'm like, I don't care. I sneezed in that thing. That's gross.
Yeah. No, seriously.
That's gross. The amount of times that we were, I mean, everybody saw the nurses wearing trash bags in New York for PPE because they didn't have anything. I mean, it's so heartbreaking.
Did you know anybody that worked at any of the New York City hospitals during that?
Yes, I did.
What in the holy fuck did they go through too? I mean, like
tears every day, man.
And I mean, between like using refrigerator trucks to store bodies, like digging pits, like it's like this is America. Like. We're not supposed to be like that's like not trying to sound elitist here, but that's like what they do in third world countries,
and that's where we were at.
And that's like, and again, like our healthcare system
failed us.
And I mean, like again, that's not all. That's not. I'm not blaming the nurses or the doctors. No. It's not their faults. They have been folks like yourself have been screaming for what you guys need for years now.
Years.
It's not like this thing, like, and I guess that's what I'm trying to kind of get at too. It's not like this thing like completely went unchecked. You know, it kind of went unchecked too.
It did.
You know, and that's what I'm kind of getting at. Not to the sense that like the Faucis and the folks like that tried to do as much as they could.
They tried,
given who was in charge at the time.
All things considered.
All things considered, right?
Fucking tomato.
Yeah, exactly. The Cheeto. Yep, exactly. And
Jesus.
It's just, but like, I mean, having, regardless of the failure of our, governmental leaders or of our community health programs or whatever, I guess just like if you could describe kind of like the day-to-day of working in a COVID unit.
All right. So what I will say is, those doctors, those nurses, those respiratory therapists, those LNAs, those lab techs, everybody busted their asses
I'm sure.
to try to help these people. It was all of a sudden there were a couple, I don't want to say good things about it, but all of a sudden you had all hands on deck and you had team style working and nursing.
People were working together collaboratively.
We cared to work together to help each other to take care of these patients because we wanted to try. We wanted to. We wanted to help and save. Like I said, I can't not help.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you there.
But a day in was you get to your shift. Usually I got in 20 minutes early because if I'm not 20 minutes early, I'm 30 minutes late.
20 minutes late, yeah.
You know me?
30, 45,
So I get in 20 minutes early, look up my patients, see all their settings, figure out what kind of drips and drugs and whatever they were on, what they needed for the day, all the goodies.
Yep.
And, as an ICU nurse, you kind of start to look at the clinical picture of a patient and you start to see, is this patient going anywhere? Are they getting any better? And you kind of just go in with the mentality of, okay, this is what I'm expected to do this shift. I need to do labs at this time. This is what I'm expecting is going to need to be done because of it. So you gown up. I would try to get 2 people in at the beginning of my shift, and we would wash our patients. ICU night nurses are typically responsible for the bed bath. So full bed bath on a patient who can't turn, can't help. If they shit themselves, that's on me. I got to clean that up. If they, if there's a mess, if they're bleeding, if they're coughing, if their chest tube's leaking, that's all me.
Yeah, it's all on you.
It's all on me. I got to do all that. And it's part of the job, which I understand.
Right. So you're not complaining. You're just describing. You're
just
giving people context.
This is what my day is
and
like.
That's the one thing I will say that I think a lot of people get confused is that when you are describing what you do, she's just bitching. It's like, then why are you in her? It's like, no.
This is what I do.
She needs to provide context so you folks understand the stakes or understand the...
This is the expectation of my job. These are my job details.
Exactly.
If I was to put it on a resume, this is the job detail.
Exactly. No, exactly. I just wanted to give some context.
Wipe ass.
I just wanted to give you some credit and context to that,
I appreciate it. But, then you start noticing clinical things. You start noticing, because patients always have a Foley catheter, you notice, oh, they're not putting out as much urine. Oh, fuck, their kidneys are starting to shut down.
Right.
Okay, all right.
Or they're dehydrated, or Lord knows.
And so then you got to think about it. Is it dehydration? Is it this? Is it this? Well, if they already have a heart failure issue, you don't want to just slam fluid on them. Their heart can't process that. So you're working with a really...
So I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, Hannah,
Mm-hmm.
it creates like this MacGyver type situation where you have to prepare for everything and expect nothing all at the same time.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and I mean, as much
Absolutely.
as that is true about the entire medical field as a whole as well, but I think that it's really unique to the sense that you have to do with the COVID stuff. You almost have to do twice the amount of work to prepare,
be prepared for
in
anything.
case this in case catastrophic failure, because this he's not actually dehydrated. He's blah blah blah.
He's
going into kidney failure.
Going into kidney failure.
Or
We're
whatever.
gonna have to bring in another machine to take over his the work of his kidneys for him. Okay, then it becomes a 1-to-1 nursing situation. Well, who's gonna take over your other patient? Because you've got two of them.
Yep.
You know,
he's not your only patient.
He's not your only patient. You've got another one. You've got to do everything for. So that would be a lot of my night, is anticipating, didacting, figuring out, trying to think where this patient's headed, what they need most, what can I recommend to the doctor that I think would help this patient, what drugs do they need, and then we would get to the point of having to paralyze patients because they were coughing on the ventilator, which was supposed to be recruiting and helping their lungs. Well, if they're coughing over it, then the vent can't do what it needs to do to keep your lungs working.
Yeah. Yep.
So then it would become a matter of paralytics. And okay, well, we need to get their sedation up before we put them on paralytics. Well, that's going to drop their blood pressure. So what do we got to do?
What do we have to do to keep their blood pressure up?
Exactly.
So
What drugs do you want to keep their blood pressure up? So it was a constant. And I mean, me, who I very much thrive in baptism by fire and controlled chaos. So the controlled chaos environment for my ADHD brain was kind of great in a sense, because I felt constantly stimulated, and I was always using my critical thinking, which I enjoy about my job a lot. To this day, that's something I really do enjoy about my job, is everything, all those clocks, all those wheels turning in my head and figuring
the
out.
hamsters
It's
on
a big
wheels
puzzle.
and
It's a big puzzle. How do I put this puzzle together? How do I fix this thing? The thing being the person. Gosh, that sounds it sounds so awful when I put it like that.
No, but I mean, you kind of have to. Like, again, for you, it's like for houses or jobs with me. Like, I need, like, okay, like, yeah, this is that. But you kind of have to, not to say you're dehumanizing them, but you have to, because you have so many of them.
You have to dissociate a little bit so that you can at least
not
so
to
you
say
can get
that
your
it's
job
affecting
done.
your level of care by any means, but to the fact that, like, I'm not saying you're seeing them as a number, but they are, in fact, kind of a number. Like,
you can't take everyone home with you.
Exactly.
You can't take
it's
every
no different
single
than
one
education.
home with you.
You can't take the kids home with you at 2:30 or at 8:30 or whatever. Like, you go home and unless you have kids of your own, you know what I mean. Unless you have kids of your own,
even,
But we won't even get into that. But you know what I'm saying.
I can't do
you know
that.
what you know what I'm saying. Unless you have like kids of your own, or
it's 24-hour care,
or you're taking care of an elderly parent or something like that.
Right.
Like the job's done. You're done. You go home.
You have to go home.
You're right. You do, and
you have to leave it behind.
And
sometime.
so I guess I guess it's building to my question. How difficult was it to just at the end of working, in a pandemic setting, to just go home and shut it off?
I couldn't.
Yeah.
I couldn't. I got diagnosed with pretty severe PTSD throughout that time, and a lot of people were laughing, and I would see people, primarily Republicans, laugh reacting at nurses who were like posting about the trauma they'd experienced and the PTSD that they were coming home with, and the severe high rates of depression and anxiety that were escalating. And people would be like, "You haven't seen a war zone?" I'm like, "Yes, I have."
Yep. And
that's the
thing.
have.
That's the thing. I think what is one of the biggest misunderstandings of post-traumatic stress is that, like, everybody assumes that it's solely from militia, fighting, like seeing somebody be killed with a firearm or something like that. No,
I was seeing people,
any mass traumatic event can trigger PTSD in people. And again, like, the majority of folks who I have dealt with who have had PTSD or no were military, obviously. That, to be fair, that is probably the most common spot, because again, you're being turned into a tool of war. You are, and you're being asked to take a life. Taking a life of a deer or something for meat or something like that is completely different than taking the life of another human being. Right.
Whereas we were struggling, giving every ounce of our being to keep these people alive, and they were still dying.
Right. And and I guess that on the flip, that's what I was going to try to be on the flip side for you. It's not so much that, we're turning anybody into an element of war or anything like that, but we have this sickness and we're trying to combat it.
It
and
felt like
everything
chemical
we
warfare.
do, it probably felt like you guys were kind of getting encircled in a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
ways, like, are boxed in, because it's like
Oh,
we're
yeah.
trying everything. We're trying this, we're trying that, and nothing is working.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's like, that can create a terrible mindset in a lot of ways too. You know, it's like you feel like the like it's never going to get better. You know what I'm saying? Like the depression, PTSD. You know,
Absolutely.
Like, you know, like there's a little bit of depression in there too. You know, so it's like, and I think that a lot of just people, aside from being in the medical field or on the
Right.
front lines of the pandemic, just had PTSD or some depression
Or CPTSD
or something
or
whatever.
something
Yeah,
like that,
insert
right.
acronym here of traumatic. You know, because it was a traumatic event,
It was traumatic
regardless if
for
you were working
everybody.
in it or not.
Absolutely.
You know, and then like. That's why I think, you know, again, I don't want it to get just glossed over.
No,
I
and I don't
wanna-
either.
I want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And like it's very similar to how, you know, we are here. And I guess now that, you know, we're 3 years in, like, I guess kind of reflecting on today, Hannah, where are we at with COVID? You know, like, I know, like, they officially ended the emergency and, like,
Right.
it's over, but I'm sure that you still see COVID
Absolutely.
patients in
Absolutely.
the hospital. It's a thing now. It's around,
Absolutely.
and I guess we're just going to, correct me if I'm wrong, we're just going to have to deal with it more or less.
It is a matter of dealing with it, but I will say that the strains of COVID that are coming out now are not nearly as fatal and
Yes.
morbid as the initial. Because that initial first, like,
Wave, yep.
that first wave was so critical. We lost so many people. We lost so many lives. So many people died. And it was incredibly infectious, for one, wildly infectious, and we didn't know, you know what I mean,
Right,
how
right.
infectious it was. You know, can it come home on your clothes? We were coming home stripping all of our clothes off, throwing them in the wash, showering
Yeah,
immediately.
I remember people, like, going grocery shopping and,
With
like,
gloves
leaving their
and-
groceries, like, out on the porch to, like
Absolutely, yes.
descale, decontaminate.
Decontaminate before you could bring
Yep,
it in.
yep.
It was a whole thing. So, I mean, we are obviously far beyond that. We've
Yes.
done enough research. We know much more about the disease now.
Yep.
I still won't go in a COVID room without my hair up and N95 on, gowns and double gloves, just because I try to
There's
be careful.
safety and mindfulness.
There's safety and mindfulness. And I might have a patient with cancer in the room next
Yep.
door. And you know
Yeah.
what? I want to be careful for their sake
Yep.
more than anything else.
That was,
Um,
I think that was the worst thing for me, is trying to be overly mindful for other people who didn't give a Frenchman's fuck
did not
about
care.
anything. And it's like, man, I'm doing my part. Imagine if everybody just, like, took the 2 seconds to do their part, cut back on community spread and all that, man.
Right.
We would have been out of this thing a lot
A
quicker.
long time ago.
Like, if we just all, like, similar to how you guys were talking about, if we all just kind of worked together.
It made a really big difference. It
It
made a
did.
really big difference.
You know, and so, like I said, you're just, you know, you're mindful. And I think that's the
Yes.
appropriate
Yeah.
way of
I agree.
looking at things as we continue to modernize. And I guess I fear as we get into, you know, more modern times about what biohazards unto the sense of whether they're
Right.
man-made or not, you know, regardless if they come out of a military lab or if they are found naturally in nature. I just think we need to be mindful of what we're doing with
Yeah.
the populations and everything like that. I mean, like, it's still crazy. You know, I don't know how much research you've done internationally, but, like, specifically, like, they're still having major issues with it in China.
They are.
Like, to the
They
point where
are.
they've still shut down, like, whole cities and stuff like
Which
that.
still kind of blows my mind because China and a lot of the like Asian countries
Yeah.
are very safe at baseline. Like it was always customary for people in Korea,
Yeah.
especially
South
like
Korea,
South Korea, North
yeah.
Korea. Either way, like
Or
they
Japan, big mask wearing
Japan
society.
big mask
yeah.
wearing society. If you have a cold, if you have the sniffles, whatever, like it's just customary and it's viewed as respectful
Yeah,
to each
yeah.
other to mask up and,
Yeah.
and be careful and be safe.
Well, I mean, between
Um,
avian flu and a lot of the other stuff they already kind of
Everything else
had.
they
Yeah,
experienced,
yep.
it was just customary and
Yep.
it was expected. So
Yep.
I'm also kind of wildly surprised that Asia is still having these really horrible outbursts and having to do shutdowns and
Yeah,
lockdowns.
it's just interesting. You know, that's like I just
Yeah.
as being 3 years now.
3
really?
years now? A
3
little bit
years now
more, yeah.
past like the the initial exposure date or whatever you want to call it. No, it's just interesting. You know, and
It
I
is.
just kind of look at it and go, I just kind of scratch my head and go, that's interesting. You know.
It's been a lot. We've learned a lot. A lot has happened. We've grown a lot. I will say a lot of those areas in Asia that that do struggle with that are
Yeah.
more impoverished
Yeah, of
areas.
course. No,
It's
I mean,
usually so they're not
same
as
thing
good
with
of access to
Africa and
health
other
care.
places, right?
Right. Not as good of access to healthcare, not as good of access to those masks, to that PPE,
Yes.
to whatever they would
Yep.
do to, you got to think about smaller living quarters. There we go.
Yep. Well, like the distancing and everything
Distancing,
like that. Yeah.
exactly. So like we did social distancing. That was a really huge thing. It's,
We had the space in our facilities,
had
even
the
if we had to like
space.
move beds around and do stuff. We still had the space
We
to
had
do
the
that.
space.
And then, like even in our schools and stuff like that, like we had to, a lot of like the custodian people are like had to do some heavy lifting and
God.
like flip shit around and like make it work. But we have, being in a developed country, we have the resources
We've had
at
the
our
luxuries, right.
disposal to make things work, which
Right.
is not something that the rest of the world can really say.
Absolutely.
And I guess just to kind of round off the COVID stuff, Hannah, do you think, looking in the medical field, looking forward, I know you guys probably talk about it, but do you feel like the future of our American medical field is bright? And again, I know it's hard for you to say as one nurse in
I'm
the
definitely
grand
biased.
stream. Of course you are, but that's okay. It's the DuView podcast. I'm biased too.
I'm definitely biased. My bias
But
is
I didn't know. That's what.
Yeah.
But do you think that there's some light at the end of the tunnel, or do you think it's a little bit more gloomy into the sense that
gloomy.
Like, yeah.
gloomy.
Yep.
I mean, people
For
are,
what reasons?
people are dying because they can't get their insulin. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
okay.
No one
Nope.
asks to be a type 1 diabetic. You
No,
know what
they
I mean?
don't.
So it's I think that the healthcare industry and big pharma as a whole have really destroyed.
Yeah, we got to take them down.
We
Yeah.
got to take them the fuck down, dude. They are they're killing people. They're
Mm-hmm.
killing people for profit. And how much it costs to make a life-saving cancer drug, and then they mark it up 300% profit for
Hannah,
themselves.
you know as well as I do that it's more you make more money treating somebody than you do curing them.
curing them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well,
And
it's
I
no
think
different
that,
than I think sorry to cut you off real quick there, but I think it's an interesting parallel in like how our entire consumer society does things. Our cars, replace. Don't have a
Replace.
car that can go forever. Like these older metal cars from the 60s and 50s and before.
run.
They do. They do.
They still
They do. They still work. And I mean, anything from dishwashers and dryers, washing machines, appliances. Like my dad, he loves telling this story. He goes, we had to get a new washer dryer upstairs, and they come in like a stacked, unit. And so like we just wanted to buy one. He goes, well, you can't just buy one. He goes, okay, well, this thing's only been here for 8 years. And the tech goes, well, that's actually pretty good considering they're only guaranteed for 5. And I said, so you're going to expect people to drop a couple grand every 5 years to replace their washer and dryer? What the fuck is wrong with you?
What is wrong
like,
with
not you
you?
specifically, but like the whole
The system.
the system.
The system.
And it's the same thing in like I said, not people not getting insulin, and like I'd even say to a bigger point in like the recovery area with Narcan and stuff like that for people too.
Gosh.
It's too bad, to like say like, oh well, we'll save certain people but not other people.
And half of the opioid addiction actually comes from medical offices too, because Big Pharma
Over prescription.
Big Pharma wants to push opioids
Yeah, they
on
do.
people
Well,
because
again-
they know it's addictive and they know they're going to keep making money off of it.
Close to home example, like when I had my knee done, Hannah. Remember I told you I needed 2 weeks worth of Percocets. 2 weeks. Fair, pretty painful experience,
Yeah.
understandable. Never have done any, have touched any opiates other than that one time in my life. Straight up. But when I was at the pharmacy getting my prescription after my surgery, they tried giving me a year-long
do.
prescription. And it's like, what the fuck is
I don't
wrong
want
with you?
it.
I don't want it.
Yeah.
And they're just like, well, you might need it. And it's like, no,
I will not.
I can tell you at the end of 2 weeks, I'll be swapping over to Tylenol and ibuprofen straight.
100%.
I can tell you that because you know what? It's not me. You know what I'm
not,
saying?
no.
Like the stuff, the shit. I mean, they bound you up too. On top of it, not to get too graphic, but like they did not do any favors for your insides.
No,
You know?
no, and we all know that. That's
Yeah.
something that we saw a lot during COVID too.
Yeah.
Was people would get COVID good. But
Yeah.
anyway, backing more off of that.
Yeah.
But no, big pharma is a big problem,
Yep.
and the health insurance is a huge
Yes,
problem.
it is.
I think that, and I know that this is a big argument and it stirs problems for a lot of people, but I really think that we should start doing something to implicate some form of universal health care. Just because
I agree.
I'm sorry, $400 out of people's paychecks shouldn't be paying for them to then have to cover a $5,000 fucking deductible before the health insurance agency will even cover anything for them.
Or on top of that, another example. My dad, God love him, poor guy, has had some knee problems.
Yeah.
And for him to go in and get a cortisone shot They were like,
Oh my god.
months out. Months. And he goes, you can't, he looks at me and you can tell he's pissed off, and I don't blame him. He says, you can't tell me that socialized medicine is all bad then. If I still have to wait the time period and I'm paying for it, either with my insurance or out of pocket myself.
Absolutely.
It's like, what the fuck? And I think that that's true of a lot of different things. I'm not saying, let's go full blown, because I'm not, you know me, I'm not full blown like socialism type shit, but like there are elements of it that you have to that I think have to be implemented at some point,
implemented at this point.
just for the sake of or for the people, your citizenry, your constituencies.
For the sake of capitalism not taking over people's well-being.
Yeah, that too.
I mean,
not to just completely, and I get it. It's like, that's what I've been, and I pushed this on the podcast before, but like capitalism that cares.
Capitalism that cares.
There is there's a window, like there is a path for that.
People have to not be greedy.
And that's
and that's
at the end of the day saying, I'm okay being a millionaire. I don't need to be a billionaire, because
correct.
Let's be real, at the end of the day, like once you start getting into the upper echelons of money, like you're set. Like unless you were really financially irresponsible, like there's very little you can do, or you just stop working altogether or whatever. Like there's very little you can do to fuck yourself out of that.
Absolutely.
Because like once you've established a certain amount of wealth in this country, you're set. That's no secret.
It's not.
It's
never
not.
been a secret.
Once you get out of the middle class, or you get upper middle class, you're set.
You pretty much are. You can stay and hang there forever.
Yeah, you can get really comfortable.
And
there.
your investments,
and unfortunately,
whatever.
that's true for more people that look like you or I.
Correct.
I don't think that the opportunities are not the same for everybody.
It's not.
And I think that that's the unfortunate bit of it. And again, it's putting profit over people. And that's what I think a lot of it, and not just specifically in your field, but all the fields in all the other areas in this country, is that they're putting profit first, or putting
Correct.
money first over people's well-beings. And I think that once we get away and get back to more of a human interest side of things, not overly blown, because if you start getting overly touchy-feely, then you'll never get out of the weeds. You know what I'm saying?
Correct.
Like there's an appropriate amount of caring to get things done, but not get dragged down.
Correct.
That's all I'm trying to say.
No, and I agree with you on that matter. I think that, socialism is appropriately applied in certain situations. I think the healthcare thing is a very big part of that situation, and taking down Big Pharma. And I think if those two things could happen and we could kind of correlate those and work those together, I genuinely think that the entire industry of healthcare as a whole could actually benefit. People could get better.
Yeah.
And I could see a better future if that were the case.
Yeah.
Until those things start happening.
Some of those things start to change. I agree.
I don't see a lot of brightness in the future as of right now.
Yeah.
Which is,
I don't disagree with you there. And I feel that way. I mean, I'm not trying to be a negative person or, glass half empty, and I'm not, because I try to look at the best, in a lot of things, but
right.
I look at it and I say, I just looking at all the red flags popping up. It's like a game of Minesweeper,
It is.
It's like, oh, there's probably a mine over there and a bomb. Yeah, right.
And
Exactly. It's like, but like, maybe some things will straighten out once some younger generations get into things like we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, though, that doesn't help us in the right now.
No.
That's like a 20-year down the road type deal. Like when we're 40 and a half, almost 50 years old. I mean, seriously, like that's the time period where,
more of the liberal and millennial. When more of the liberal, millennial, and Gen Z start taking over, I think we'll actually start to see some of those changes. But pretty much until the assholes die out of office, it's not going to happen.
You're not wrong. And again, like as we've talked about, and I know you and I have talked about this, like you were one of the few people that saw me, like when I was working the presidential campaign and doing like my political work, and like, it's just like to get out of that. It was very refreshing in a lot of ways to like be able to do other things, but at the same time, it's frustrating. Like when you sit down, talk with your friends, and realize that like some of the injustices that piss you off, you had a hand in like not getting going, but help propel some of that. And it's like you can't beat yourself up over it by any means, but like you look at it and you just go, yeah, I'm glad I'm not doing that anymore. Holy shit.
100%. Yeah, I'm actually looking into different aspects of nursing now because we're burnt out, man.
Yeah,
we're really burnt out. It's compassion burnout, it's energy burnout,
it's everything.
It's everything. And
Yep.
Maybe I do want to be in the OR where all my patients are sedated and I don't have to talk to anyone because I can't.
Or perhaps that's a stepping stone for you, or like maybe you need a break, deal with some people that you're not getting a lot of response off of per se.
I don't have to get any pushback.
You're still able to give them that same high level of care that you want to perpetuate. And like I think that that's really unique in your setting. You know, like
It
I
is.
said, I don't think you can say that in a lot of other
And that's, again,
aspects
something
of
I do
work.
love about nursing is that you have the option to go wherever you want within nursing. I
Right.
know nurses who work from home doing chart review. I'm
Yeah.
like, damn, that could be nice.
It could be, but
could
I
be
could also see
nice.
you getting real bored.
Oh,
doing
I'd
that.
get so bored. I am such a busybody.
Yeah.
I would be like, oh, I'll do 3 loads of laundry while I wait for this phone call and then miss the phone call. And then I know myself. I couldn't really work from home. It's a great idea, but for me,
for somebody like me, it's like, nope.
No.
That's like the biggest thing too. It's like, oh, I'll do laundry or I'll sneak this
this
chore.
chore
Yeah,
in.
yeah,
I'll go
oh,
wash
yeah.
the dishes.
Yeah,
Look at- ooh.
yeah, it doesn't quite work.
It
very
doesn't
well.
work that
No,
way. I
it
do have to
never
actually be
does.
working.
Yep, no,
Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
but like I prefer to focus on that, and that's why I kind of like trade work. You go in,
Yep.
you're at the job site, you go home, nothing comes home with you except
Correct.
your tools.
Correct. and again, nursing is a trade, so I
Yep.
kind of do
Yep.
also do
Yep.
that. The emotional part comes
Yeah,
home with me
that's different,
sometimes,
right.
but with years of experience, I've gotten better at leave work at the door, go home, do what you got to do to take care
those
of
doors
you.
slide shut behind you, and you leave it there.
You
and
have
that's
to.
and I think that's tough for a lot of people. I think especially
is.
young people who are like
Just
ourselves,
starting.
who are learning to navigate the workforce, because the workforce is an interesting place, and it's like. It's not always good. It's good, and it's a real mixed bag. For some people, like we've talked to, they've gone on and they love their jobs and they love the company they work for and everything like that. And some people have had a lot rougher of a go.
Yeah. I will say I do love being a nurse. I do
Yep.
love it. There are times that are so fucking rewarding. There
Yeah.
are times that make me feel like, oh my God, I'm the best. Oh God, I had this one sweet, sweet patient, and she was so sick. She had a upper bleed in her stomach, and she also had C. diff, so
Oh,
an
geez.
infection.
Yep.
Yeah, GI infection
Yep,
all
yep.
over. That poor woman was shitting blood every hour, and she was the sweetest goddamn thing. I was like, Wilma, I do not mind wiping your ass once.
Yep.
Not one time.
Because you're good about it,
Because
yep.
you are an angel, and I
Yep.
love taking care of you.
Yep.
And those situations, that makes it worth it.
Yeah.
That makes it worth it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, that's not.
And being able to save a life, and at the end of the day, look back and see that, wow, they're doing better from the start of my shift. I actually helped them today.
That's positive change.
That's
right?
positive
Yep.
change. That is rewarding. It makes me feel better, knowing that we could
Yeah.
do that. So, yeah, there's a
That-
lot.
that's hey, and that's the good full circle aspect with that too.
Yeah.
But kind of as I mentioned at the previous beginning, start of the episode, we bonded over a lot of different things, road trips, whether that be, and one of our biggest tying aspects that it really kind of hit off our friendship was our mutual love of music.
Absolutely.
Whether that be rooted in different like main genres that we listen to, but like growing up and having, I guess I'll say
Musical influence.
at least 1 or 2 hippie parents.
Oh, yes.
Had a very, I'd say, positive impact on our musical knowledge and areas
Absolutely.
of things. And I think I look very fondly onto some of we've been to, I think, 2 concerts
yeah,
together.
yeah.
One being a Jerry Garcia tribute band at the Stone Church.
That was so fun.
In Newmarket, which we went to in a snowstorm.
And trudged through the
Yeah,
snow.
like we
So
we
fun.
went out to dinner and then we like trudged through the snow up the hill to where this venue was in Newmarket, New Hampshire. Great spot, the Stone Church.
Beautiful.
Really, I love that. I loved going there.
That venue was great.
And like in true Grateful Dead Garcia fashion, they started late. They warmed up, then went out to smoke, and then came back in.
Ripped.
And came back in. Oh, sorry, we had a quick hiccup there,
There we go.
on the
I was gonna say, I
device.
lost
Sorry
it.
about that. Nope, we just had a quick hiccup. Technology, it's good when it works. We're just
good when it works.
too loud,
We are loud.
But that being said, I lost my train of thought here. Apologies, folks. But just like like in
Music.
true Jerry Garcia fashion, I guess as I was saying, this Garcia tribute band went out, smoked, did their thing, and came back in, which was really really kind of funny and really kind of true to form, I guess, in a lot of ways. I mean, we had a great night
It was
dancing.
so fun. I danced all night with a
Yep.
crazy hippie lady. She
Yep.
was awesome.
Yep.
She was great.
Yep,
and then Lucas. And
Oh gosh,
we had a
yeah,
grand
Lucas
time.
was with
Lucas
us
was
too.
with us.
Friend
It
of the
was
friend of the podcast.
Such a good time.
Yep.
And then the last show we went to, which was at Thompson's Point, and
honestly, that was my first show there, and as like a Mainer,
it was great. Minus me getting puked on in line.
that was bullshit.
LOL.
That was bullshit. That was
I
wild.
was trying so hard to be nice, but I was like, "These are sandals, man.
Yep.
These
Nope.
are sandals."
It's not coming out, like.
I was like, "That's cool. I get to walk around in
Yeah.
this."
No.
Bought an $8 bottle of water to rinse off my feet.
Oh, I know. I felt so bad for you.
It was fine.
Oh, man.
If it
yeah.
had happened to
she was
anyone
just like,
else-
oh, sorry, I had a rough night. I'm like, I guess you did.
It's noon.
Yeah. It's like,
It's
no, noon.
noon.
At noon, it was like 6 o'clock. Like, the show started at 7, and we're in line at, out. It's a Sunday show, too.
It's a Sunday, man.
It's oh, God. Never miss a Sunday show, by the way.
Never.
Not once. But, I don't know, Phil Lesh, man, because I had seen Dead and Company.
Yeah.
And, like, they're on their final summer tour ever.
Yeah.
And, like, I was going to talk to you, like, we'll talk after about, I really want to go to at least one of the shows. But they're fucking expensive. And we'll talk about it,
We'll
though.
get there. We'll get
but
there.
anyway, regardless of what I'm getting at, though, is that, we saw Phil Lesh and Friends. And for those of you that don't know, Phil Lesh is the former bass player of the Grateful Dead. One of my favorite groups, if not my favorite group of all time, easily. But that being said, he had his son and a bunch of other folks playing with him that were all very accomplished musicians. I've talked about this show a little bit before when I had Lucas on, but from your perspective, I mean, like, that was a really unique concert for me. Like I said,
sure.
I've seen Dead and Company, but I hadn't seen Phil Lesh alone. Like, what were your kind of thoughts on the show? It's like a year ago now, but like
It's been a year. It was a great show. I mean, and I can see why in the 60s people would trip sack at those shows because one song was like 45 minutes. And I was like, holy shit, we're still on this song. And I mean, I was having a grand old time, but after I think I left early after 4 hours. That was leaving early was 4 hours.
Yeah, it was. That's
and
funny.
I got very much into the punk scene, pop punk, heavy into metalcore.
Well, that's
all
what
of
I
that
was
going to
kind of ask you because it's a little different.
So different.
Like
So
in terms
different.
of like, like the vibe and like what you do when you're there, like mosh pit / lack thereof, like it's just a bunch of people like doing like
We're just wavy dancing,
dancing, yeah.
Wavy davy.
It's a great time.
It was lovely. It was great. I mean, I was raised on very good music,
Mama P.
Zeppelin, Mama P, Zeppelin,
Shout
Hendrix, Grateful Dead, Fish. I mean, you name
Yep.
it. I mean, I love all of it. But my heart really did find a spot with pop punk music and punk music in general.
Well, that's like always what you were really about.
It was always what I was
about. That's like her,
about.
if anybody knows Hannah, that's her
I'm the
main.
pop punk princess on Instagram if you're looking. But
Right on.
that was my thing. I toured with pop punk bands and I followed bands.
You've done some roadie stuff,
I
run
loved
merch
it.
tables.
I loved it. I loved the environment. It was
Promoted shows.
And I promoted shows a lot. You sent me like a list of questions and things to think about. And I was trying to think about my love for that kind of music and where it stems from.
Where it started.
Yeah,
I was gonna ask you that. I was like, what was the catalyst for that? Like,
it was
what prompted it?
Man, it was being a depressed emo kid with divorced parents in middle school. To be very blunt, and then I kind of lost touch with it for that side of music for a while, and tried to like move on to other things.
Yeah.
And I think when I first started at St. A's, I was trying to be a different version of myself, only to come to find that sophomore, junior, senior year, who I really was in that music scene. That was me. That made me feel whole.
Leaving part of yourself to go find yourself, just to realize where you were.
Where I was actually where I wanted
the whole
to be.
time. Yeah,
Yep,
exactly.
yep.
But unless you left,
This is growth.
It's like leaving home. It's like leaving your hometown.
Right.
Unless you leave, go see some shit, and come back. You're
You're
never gonna know.
You're never gonna know.
That's cool. That's nice.
Yeah, it's also a matter of I feel like I'm a person who very much wears their emotions on their sleeve. You can tell when I'm pissed. You can tell when I'm happy.
Yeah, you can.
Yes, you can. You can tell. And I feel like that kind of music, that whole environment is such vulnerability and so much just like openly wearing those emotions. And, if you need to scream, there's music for that. You need to cry, there's music for that.
There is.
And when you go to those shows, it is an entire fucking venue full of people who see, feel, hear, understand, and experience all those emotions just as you do. So there's a lot that I really felt, it made me feel at peace in a way. And it's funny to say that because, I'm going to mosh pits and getting my face kicked in.
Right.
But to know there were other people who experienced that emotion as strongly as I did was comforting. It was comforting in a way.
See, it's funny you say that.
It was like home.
It reminded me of a quote that I have on my phone. Art is how we decorate space. Music is how we decorate time.
Oh, I like that quote.
And I think that fits that. And the whole, like I said, the whole encompassing thing, of us and music very, very well. in a lot of ways. I think that's very cool. Like I said, though, like for you to go on that musical journey such as that, I mean, like I said, you're never going to, you ain't gonna learn what you don't want to know.
Exactly.
And so, like,
I know where my heart lies.
yeah, exactly. And I think that so in that genre of music, like don't get me wrong, it's not my main genre, but there's some really
great hits.
talented musicians in the punk, pop punk, whatever, scene there. And and especially that extends to your local groups too that don't have a big record deal yet, that might just be on, like SoundCloud or Bandcamp or whatever. And I think there's a huge space for that too. And I think that's like a huge thing I'm trying to really like focus on myself is like more local music, whether it be jam bands, whether it be punk groups, whether it be, and I think that's a unique thing about Maine and New Hampshire to a little bit lesser of an extent. Like the Maine local music scene is wild.
Oh
like,
it's everything.
There's I mean from folk music to punk music to jam bands, Grateful Dead, Fish stuff. Like it's all over the place. If you want it, you can find it. And there's somebody who is probably like the music teacher at a school or something like that, and like the other guy's like a postmaster. You know what I'm saying? It's like this is the mail carrier, and like they never really like got it like professionally, but they are professional
but
musicians.
They're still talented professional musicians.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I was very big about that in college. I mean, all those bands I did promos for, all those shows that I was at constantly. I mean, they were underground music. They were people who played out of their basement I went to so many fucking dirty basement shows. Good Lord.
But like, there's a place for that.
But there's
a
place for that.
Like that's like the part of I think that's not unique to the American experience, but I think that's something that came out of America. Like,
I agree.
And maybe England to a lesser, extent too, because they're really big into the. There's a huge division of the punk movement that came out of the out of England. But like, and I think it's just really cool to see how things have changed from, I don't know, maybe like from like your hair. I mean, like you could say like the first kind of punk people came out of like your hair bands and like some of your stuff, like anti-disco stuff,
and then
like,
you get into
as you
like
got
more
into
the
the later
grunge,
70s,
Nirvana.
and then you get into like eventually like I mean like. You have like your more heavy metal, metal starts to develop itself, but then again, the punk scene also, whether it be like the, the Ramones or whoever it is, like
Sublime.
Like, and again, like Sublime, like people forget like they have very much a spot in like a lot of that, as much as like there's some rap elements, involved with some of that
there's
too.
Some ska, there's some rap, there's
exactly,
some punk,
but and I think that I love, and I think like, I didn't listen to a lot of like Sublime individually, honestly, before I started hanging out with you. Like, I listened to some of it, like obviously, like a couple of the songs, but like like the song they did with like the Dirty Heads,
everyone
like
knew
that one, like that, but that was radio popular too.
That was radio popular.
That made it onto the top 40, and
then
like
you listen to more of their stuff, and you realize how much of the sway and the reggae feel they kind of have
and
to them.
They hop genres.
Yeah,
they hop
change.
genres. Like you go from like one of your earlier albums, like Santeria, like like that, but like, and then you look at some of like.
And then you go to Saw Red.
Yeah, right,
Saw
exactly.
Red, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's
no,
like,
exactly.
You go completely from like cozy Santeria reggae vibes to like heavy punk Saw Red vibes, and I loved that about that.
It's dynamic, which is really unique. And so, like, you've been to Warped Tour, right?
No, numerous times. Numerous times. I live at Warped Tour if I could.
And like, so I guess that's something that's pretty foreign to me in a lot of ways, but like, and I guess something that. You wouldn't be having Warped Tour in Maine obviously, but like what was that experience if you could just like describe that a little, just I mean I know you've been to a couple of them, but like for those that don't know, like I said, I've talked to you about it, but I like again sharing your perspective on something.
So Warped Tour is it was a huge festival, but not like an EDM music festival. Like you're not in a forest with all these blinking crazy lights or right. It's not Coachella.
Yeah, right.
But it is numerous different stages set up on one venue, and you have the opportunity, and they have bands set up for different times, and you kind of stage hop and you go to each different one, and it was so fucking amazing because I remember at one point there was, I think it was 2020, maybe 2021, and we went to Warped Tour down at the Verizon or whatever it is down in Massachusetts. I cannot remember.
In Mansfield.
Mansfield. Yes. Thank you.
The amphitheater. I've been there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they set up 5 stages in there. The amphitheater being one of them. Then they set up 2 main stages, and then there were 2 hardcore stages.
Yep.
So there was one point where. And like these crowds are fucking massive. You've got like 10,000 people between these 2 stage areas, but they're all. But so say the show for Knuckle Puck was at 1:30, and you're at Knuckle Puck, and you're crowd surfing to the front and whatever, and then it was sensational because the band that came on next at 2:15 was Mayday Parade. So my ass literally crowd surfed from the Knuckle Puck pit over to the Mayday pit and just kept on going. It was so fucking sensational. And then my friend's band Keep Flying that I really try to promote. I love them so much with my whole heart and more. They are sensational. If you're interested in looking them up, Keep Flying is their name on
Shout
Instagram.
out.
Keep
Yep.
Flying Band. And they have shows in I think they're playing in Worcester on the 6th of May at Hotel Vernon, and then they are playing again in Portland, Maine on the 7th. So
cool.
if you
So
are
you can
in
see
the
them
area,
if you're in
the
Maine.
area, my boys are usually in the Pennsylvania, New York. They're all kind of
Yep.
scattered around that general
and
area.
send that to me too, and
I
I'll be sure to throw that on the
They're incredible
on
guys.
the DuView page. Yeah.
But I remember seeing them at the Bungalow, the
Yep.
shitty venue that I worked at in Manchester, New Hampshire.
The good old bungalow.
The good old
Yep,
bunghole.
yep.
It was something. Bungholio.
Bungholio. Yeah, Bungholio.
Bungholio. Brother.
Hey, Cornholio.
But it was I remember seeing them playing to a crowd of like 15, and I had never seen this band before, and I was there with my very good friend Luke. And he was like, "You don't know them yet?" And I was like, "No," because I saw this guy come on main stage, John Ryan, holding a giant, beautiful tenor saxophone and wearing
cool.
short shorts, covered head to toe in tattoos, big dangly where his gauges were hanging, and rainbow high socks. Just had the whole fucking look. And Luke looked at me and he's like, "You're gonna like this band." And I fell in love that night and followed them around the country as much as I could.
Nice.
I loved that band, and I saw them play at that 2020 or 2021 Warped Tour in the amphitheater.
That's cool.
So I went from seeing them playing to 30 people to playing in front of, I don't know, maybe 150, maybe 200 people.
That's
then
how
playing.
it's kind of supposed to work.
That's how it's supposed to work. And then 2021, when we graduated from college, they did the 25th anniversary reunion of Warped Tour, and it was the last Warped Tour that Vans put on. So my heart's broken. I can't go to another Vans Warped Tour.
Right.
But my friends played a huge stage to over 10,000 fucking people. So I went from seeing them in basements to seeing them having a headlining spot at Warped Tour,
That's full circle.
It was fucking incredible. And so that real sense of community and that feeling of I don't know, that comfort that I said, it was like, while I knew that I was in that crowd with 10,000 other people, I knew those boys recognized my face.
Yeah, that's
and
cool.
it was just cool. Yep. It was such an amazing, incredible experience, and I loved every second of watching them grow as musicians, as people, as a band, and I'm still into and watching their Instagram stories every day, seeing where they're on tour, and you know, I love it. I love every part of that community within the punk scene. You know?
And again, like that's why I love having folks like yourself on, Hannah, because like while we're friends and we have obviously like, you know, overlying, you know,
things in
interests
common,
and stuff like that. Yeah, you wouldn't be friends if you weren't. But like at the same time, it's something that's just a world I am not versed in at all. Could I find my way through and trip through? Of course I probably could, you know, with some guidance. But at the
teach you how to two-step.
Right, exactly. I can dance. At the same time, though, it's opening yourself up to new experiences, which I think is the cool thing. And for me, it's always gaining perspective.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, I'm not a huge punk guy. Do I listen to punk music? Do I listen to pop punk music? Of course I do.
Here and there, right.
You know, like, but it's unique. And that's why I like having all of our different, you know, friends with all of their different little, I guess, niche music tastes.
Yeah.
Myself included, you know? It's like, whether that be, you know, me listening to jam band stuff or like older like crooners, Sinatra, you know, that type of stuff, you know, or whatever. And that's the cool thing about music is that it doesn't care if there's borders. It doesn't care if there's, you know, who the president is. It doesn't, you know, I mean, or maybe it does, and maybe that's when you get some
punk
better
shows
music.
will shit on politicians a lot.
I was going to say that's why I changed my answer. The same thing with some of the classic rock musicians too.
True, yeah, you're
but
very
you know
right.
they don't, and I guess what I'm trying to say is that, you know, like music will carry on regardless of who's president, regardless of, you know,
Yes,
if the sky is burning or if it's not. Like, yeah, the tone or like what is talked about might change.
Reminds me of
but,
Titanic when they're still playing music
Yeah,
as the ship is
Yeah,
thinking.
yeah,
Wait, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Very
It's
much.
like, oh yeah, save face, boys, save face.
just
That's
play.
a very like that's also a very like European English thing. It's like things are fucked, but keep appearances, mate.
Keep
Yeah,
appearances,
keep
mate.
going. Yeah. It's
Keep
like,
it going.
oh yeah, keep it going. I don't know. I just feel like that we as Americans would just be like screaming, running around, like no one would still be sitting there playing the instrument. You know
I
what
might
I mean?
be.
Like, all right,
I might
fair,
be
touche.
ready. I
Yeah.
might be ready for the world to burn, and I'll just be sitting there with a guitar, like,
Okay,
let's see.
Nero.
Let's see. Or just singing, like, well, we're all
There
gonna
goes.
die
Yeah,
anyway. I
right,
may as well
right.
sing.
That's true.
Na-na-na-na-na.
And grab that nuclear warhead and just bite off the top of it. But no, that's it's funny, you know. Like I said, I try to be as optimistic as we can about things,
Right.
But you also have to look at things at face value too.
Right. Very much. Absolutely.
But Hannah, thank you so much for coming on,
Dude, man.
I greatly appreciate it.
I'm so glad we had this time. This
Me
is
too.
great. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
It's been awesome. And like I said, that shout out. So Keep Flying's going to be playing the 6th in Portland, and the 7th in Worcester, Mass.
Okay, yeah,
And
we'll
then
have that posted too.
we'll post that up. And then another friend of mine's band is playing this Sunday at Gino's Rock Club in Portland. So
Right on.
They are called, I don't know. I don't remember. I got to think about it.
That's
But
okay.
We'll post it.
We'll post it.
But
Yep.
but yeah, thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it. This has been a blast.
Yeah, right on. Happy to have you. And you can keep up to date with this episode and all of our other episodes at the DuView Podcast social media. Like I said, we're on YouTube now with video. Again, hopefully the stupid camera does what it's supposed to do and everything like that. Apologies for losing the last 5 minutes of the video last episode. Don't really know what happened there. I think I had the camera plugged in and it just shut off because it was like, oh, I'm full
Battery's
now.
full.
Yeah, exactly.
Great.
I was like, but
Great.
so anywho, you know, we're it's a learning experience, you know, with that too for me because like I said, not a professional video editor by any means, but you know, just thank you obviously for Hannah for coming on, and thank all of you for keeping up to date. Like I said, give us a a watch on YouTube, or you know, give us a follow, DuView 207 on Instagram, and the DuView Podcast everywhere else where you can find your podcasts. And yeah, just really trying to keep it going here, guys. Have some more guests coming up as the summer months go on here. Getting ready to also be pretty close to celebrating our 2-year anniversary. So, you know, a lot of good stuff coming
That's
up, you know.
awesome.
So,
Proud of
like I
you.
said, thank you one more time to Miss Hannah Robillard for coming on. Thank you, HR.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And thank all of you. Keep tuning in. Keep sharing stuff. And like I said, guys, we'll be back here with a new episode in probably another month here with videos. So, like I said, stay tuned, stay up to date, and going to keep giving you guys the best of Maine life, as well as some,
Keep
you know,
on keeping on.
music adventures and general shenanigans. And, of course, to echo what Hannah just said, keep on keeping on, guys. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you here real soon.